Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome, everybody, to the adventure of my lifetime. I've got to tell you, it's going to be a lot of fun today. We've got a great author. Oh, boy, he's done so much. And let me go through his bio real quick, just because he's an entrepreneur, he's an author, he's a speaker, and he's a retired Navy SEAL. First of all, his name is Marty Strong. And first of all, Marty, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Oh, thanks. And thanks for having me, Kevin.
This will be a great deal of fun because you are an author. You've written lots of books. You've got like what, 9 or so, six
12 now. Yeah. 12.
You got
now,
12. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you've got some novels, and you've also got some business journals, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you like doing the most?
I like writing the novels. The 9 novels were they're very cathartic, and you can kind of, because they're novels, you can kind of go with the flow. And anybody that's done fiction writing, after a while, when you get comfortable, you realize the characters kind of take you places that you didn't plan. So that's fun. You're not really sure where it's going to go, and you stay within the story arc and all that kind of stuff, but you're surprised, and it's fun. But the business books are, somebody's going to read this and think I'm an idiot. I know it.
No.
So you have that kind of going on. And then, like, my first business book was really well received. Everybody loved it and everything. So then when I went to write the second one, I said, yeah, but this one's going to, how can I ever follow up the first one, with one that's as good? So yeah, it's business books. There's a lot more pressure on you because you're doing it professionally and laying out your philosophy and all that.
And if you were to, well, first of all, I got to say that you're not the first author that I've talked to that says, I develop a character and I put the character in a room, and then it just kind of goes and it just kind of flows, and it meets another character, and then that character introduces you to another one, and it just kind of works like that. Are you surprised during this process?
Well, in the beginning, I made a conscious decision not to diagram and storyboard the hell out of the first book. And I did that because stream of consciousness writing is a lot more fun. It's more comfortable, and it really allows your creativity to flow. Where planned and structured writing, it's like you might think. It's like trying to put a building together. It's very, very linear and so very not very creative. And you're second guessing, and you're going back and looking at everything to make sure it's going according to plan. So I decided consciously in the first novel I wrote to do the second path of creative stream of consciousness. And you write the whole thing. You don't really look back. You don't edit it. You wait until it's done, essentially, and then you go back. And so the story gets out. And the story is, 3-act play. You got a beginning, middle, and end. And you have main characters, which you've thought about a little bit. But the fun thing is, it's kind of like a pinball machine. The main character walks into a room and is looking for something, and then bumps into a person in the room that lost their keys. And you're like, where did that person go? How did I come up with a person who lost their keys as the person they bump into to ask, for guidance or for directions, whatever. And then your mind says, well, make this person really interesting. Like they've got their dog locked in the car, and that's why it's so vital to get the keys. And so now this person, the main character, gets sucked into trying to help this person get the dog out of the car. It's just a little side vignette, but it also helps you make all the characters feel like real people, because that's what really happens in life. You bump into these weird situations, and life takes you where life's going to take you. It's not always planned out.
Well, and that's I would think that is what draws people in, because they appear to be real folks that just normal life is happening to, and they end up in extraordinary situations.
Yeah, the key is to try to be right characters that people align with and are sympathetic to or empathize with. And the old story is you come up with a hero or a heroine, and beginning of the book, you chase them up a tree and you spend the rest of the time in the book trying to get them out of the tree. And the tree is the dilemma. The tree is the challenge, the problem, the crisis. And if you don't create real characters with real, strengths and flaws, people can't get emotionally engaged and attracted and attached to those characters because you want them to care that they're up in the tree. You want them to care that,
Exactly.
yeah, right. So, like for example, in that example with the person that can't find their keys. Well, what if the main character has a timetable too, and they're trying to get something done, and now this is disrupting the timetable. So now you're concerned about the person with the key and the dog, but you're also concerned about the main character trying to get to a certain point for a vital meeting. And if they blow that, that there's all these other consequences. So you're like, come on, get the keys, get the dog, get on, keep moving. And if you've done that, if you've got people thinking that way, then you've done a good job in building the character.
I think that's awesome. Now, before I'm assuming now, well, I don't know this, so I guess I'll ask. Were you writing before you became a Navy SEAL, or did you start writing afterwards?
Oh, long after. I was only 17 when I joined the Navy, and I think I was just turning 18 when I went through the SEAL selection training in Coronado, California. So my writing, I always liked to write when I was a kid. I did well in English classes, and I enjoyed the process. I always loved to read. That always helps you when you're writing. If you've read a lot of books and read a lot of good authors, you're comfortable putting your thoughts on paper because you know how thoughts are supposed to be structured. You kind of know the feel of it. And in the Navy, there's military technical writing. So in the SEAL teams, they're small units, and so you do a lot of mission planning, which is a lot of what if scenario work. So you're storyboarding out all these missions, and a mission might have 5 or 6 or 7 different possible paths to success. And you're swapping out different phases and steps in the storyboard. So it's a very creative process. And then you're writing it down, then you're changing it and you're adjusting it. And the characters are the SEALs. I mean, you're the character in the story you're building, and the story is your plan, how you're going to go out and execute it. And then once you have all that and you give everybody the briefing and you rehearse it and everybody goes, this is going to be great. And you go out there and the entire plan falls apart and you make something up on the fly. 99 times out of 100, you make something up in the moment when you're there.
I have to tell you, my son joined the Air Force and he wanted to become what's called a seer. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah.
And basically what a seer is, for those who don't know, and please, Marty, since you know, and I'm just going on what he says, I'll defer to your expertise. But a seer is someone that teaches pilots who get shot down behind enemy lines how to survive without getting captured, and being able to eat and being able to make a tent out of a paper bag or whatever they have to do. Am I close?
Exactly right. Survival, escape, evasion, and can't remember what the R stands for, but yeah, it's SERE. I had to go through it as a student a long time ago when I was a kid. So that's it.
He made it for 3 days. He was very proud of that because what they do, well, as you know, and this is what he relayed to me, is you don't sleep much. You are out and about in the woods, and you're hiking, and you got a 50-pound pack, and you're going and then you get to stop, and then they have you do a test. Like in his case, he failed at making a tie, which was what he needed to do as part of the training. And so after like 3 days, and then he said his third day he got to sleep a little bit, but he was on an anthill with a red anthill. So that didn't go over real well. And he said after 3 days, and apparently they can do this, after 3 days, they said, you don't appear to be into this, young man. So we're going to go ahead and flunk you and put you back into the ranks. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I mean, there's every service has their own variation of that same course, and they all run it a little bit differently. Special operations has their own. The Air Force, Army, Marine Corps. Marine Corps tends to go to the Navy ones. Pilots all go to the Navy ones. SEALs all go to the Navy ones. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, you didn't volunteer to go to it. Like you have to volunteer to become a special operator. So you have to volunteer to become a Green Beret, a SEAL, which means you can quit any minute. You can just say, nah, I'm done. Obviously, they can drop you for lots of different reasons, medical reasons, academic reasons. You fail to pass exams and things like that. physical standards. Yeah, but I was an instructor twice at our SEAL selection course, and there's a fine line between putting challenges in front of these young guys and then watching them try to do it, or it turns into punishment, or they're clearly not capable of doing it for one reason or the other, and then stepping in and making sure they're okay, and then having a chat with them whether they want to keep going on or not.
I've seen in the movies, like Officer and a Gentleman and some of the other ones, that there is this bell. Is that Hollywood, or is there actually a bell that if you decide you're done, you can walk up and ring the bell?
Well, the bell, I don't know if there's bells in other courses. I mean, Officer and Gentleman was what's called AOCS, Aviation Officer Candidate School, for Marines and naval officers that want to become pilots. So they go through a different version, a little bit harsher version, run by Marines, to weed them out, because they're going to be fighter pilots or they're going to be combat pilots, right?
Yeah.
The SEAL community's had a bell around probably at least since the early 60s. And it may even date back to further before that. But when the SEALs were created in 1962 and the basic selection course was created, which was pretty much a mirror image of a course that was set up in the mid to late part of World War II. A lot of the same elements that are in the current SEAL basic course were in that original course. And they thought all these things were based on combat experiences in North Africa, in Italy, and other places that they brought back to the course. So they were tests. They were psychological tests, but basically psychological because you're getting physically fatigued to the point where you make a psychological choice. And the bell is a great symbol of that choice. It's a physical act. You can think about quitting all day long, but to physically stand up and walk over to where the bell is, and during Hell Week, which is 5 days of much more brutal treatment, the bell's in the back of the truck on every evolution of every day. It's mobile. It's moving with you. When Hell Week's not in session, it's hanging in front of the first phase office of BUDS. And I mean, we've had guys, low crawl, rolling underneath parked vehicles, and then sprinting to bring out so they wouldn't be talked back into the class, because they knew once that bell's rung, that's the finality. You ring it one time, you're done, and nobody can take that back. And they're told this in the very beginning. You're here as volunteers. You made a choice, but you can make a choice to leave too. But this is the deal. You have to do it. It's supposed to be kind of a public acknowledgement that you've decided, I'm not in this. It sends a message to everybody else that sees it happen. But just as often, people just sneak in and do it. Which, I remember times I was in my office and I was in charge of the first phase where Hell Week is and everything. And I'd be halfway into my, first cup of coffee and almost spit it out because I'd hear the bell ring out there and like, what the heck? We all jump up and there's some guy standing there and he drops his helmet and says, I'm done. And you can't counsel him. You can't try to talk him into, you can't normally do that. You have all these different chat sessions that, 2 or 3 people try to help because they're young guys, you try to help the kid out and unscrew their mind a little bit. You don't give them any excuses. You don't give them like the playbook on how to move forward. You just say, look, think about the decision. Half the time they'll turn around and they'll leave. But if they've rung the bell, it's too late. So
It's all done.
Finality. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were a 17-year. I'm curious as to your mindset. That 17-year-old kid, and you go into the military, and you decided you wanted to become a SEAL. Was that something that you had visions of when you were even younger before you got in, or was that something that they said, "Hey, we think that you'd be really good at this," and they talk you into it?
So ironically, I read all these books on planning and mindset and all these other things, and I had no plan and no mindset at 17 years old. I mean,
Who does?
I ended up at SEAL training because of a mistake in orders. I didn't actually decide to go there. I went to air traffic and radar school in Great Lakes, Illinois, and about 17 weeks. And I was supposed to go to a destroyer, a cruiser, I'm sorry, in the Mediterranean. And instead, I got orders to underwater demolition SEAL training Coronado. The next morning, they gave me the tickets. Get on a plane, you're flying to San Diego. I called my dad. My dad, had me read the orders to him from O'Hare Airport. And he'd been in the Navy during the Korean War. And he said, well, son, they're called orders for a reason. You have to go out there, but just find a chief petty officer, tell them what the situation is, and they'll get it all worked out, and you'll be back, where you're supposed to be. And so I did that. And instead of a chief, I ended up with a master chief with 5 combat tours in Vietnam. The guy talked me into volunteering.
Well,
that's it. No master plan, no yearning to do it, no 5,000 push-ups a year preparing for it. I just went, okay,
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah.
And again, I just want to say thank you for your service. And it is remarkable what those guys do. And we'll never know. I had a gentleman that I worked with at a radio station, and he was a trainer for SEALs and for other folks. And he had to laugh because we were talking about being on an airplane, and they don't allow razor blades on an airplane, and he said, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard, because the guys I train can kill you with a pencil.
Yeah, I don't really even need that. Yeah.
So from that standpoint,
not that you're walking around all the time thinking about that, but yeah, you have to be trained. You're trained in everything. You're trained in, your warrior mindset is not that you're going to go out and try to kill somebody on purpose, or that you're going to try to go out and kill somebody in a particular way, like with your hands. It's actually the opposite. You picture yourself in a fight, and if you're at a great distance, you learn and go to schools and stuff to learn how to call in naval gunfire, artillery, airstrikes. If you're 700-800 yards out, you go to school and you're trained on how to shoot sniper rifles and long range machine guns, and you're trained on every single range right up until it's right here in your face and you don't have any weapons. And then you're trained how to fight and defend yourself and defeat whatever the threat is at that range. So you're taught it's a weapon system, starting with your body all the way out to putting metal on foreheads using other people's skills and capabilities, because that's the nature of the game you're going to get into. SEALs are naturally, they're supposed to rely on stealth, and they're supposed to rely on surprise. And in Vietnam, it was considered kind of a mistake if you got into a firefight, unless it was an ambush that you set up and it was overwhelmingly successful because you set it up. If you just bumped into somebody and got into a shootout, that was considered screwing up, because you were supposed to be ninjas. You were supposed to slide into villages, do what you needed to do, slide back out. And they aren't into frontal assaults and all that stuff. So the mindset's a little bit differently. You prepare to fight well, but what you want to do is you want to come in and do a lot of good things and get out to fight another day, because you're a pretty expensive asset.
What you've been talking about, and I didn't really recognize it until you were talking about it, because of the planning and the training and the more planning and being nimble, both mentally and physically, and being able to do those things. And the Navy SEAL mindset is the same, a little bit different, but the same on the battlefield as it is in business. Explain because I read that right there on your website. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. So the title of my first business book was Be Nimble, how the creative Navy SEAL mindset wins on the battlefield and in business. And I was talking about the storyboarding of mission planning. We would bring everybody into the mix. Everybody had kind of an equal say, because you never know when the outlier person is going to come up with the good idea. So it might be the most junior person in the room. It might be somebody that has no combat experience, but it doesn't really matter, because there's a certain kind of experience that is useful, but there's also a certain kind of experience that's very harmful in business and in combat. And that is where you're pretty much in a rut with a football play, a formula, and you're winning and you're winning and you're winning. And what you don't know is you're about to lose big, because you're doing the same thing over and over again. And the bad guys or the universe has decided to change things up on you. And because you're not paying attention, because you've got a system, you walk right into that next mess. So what you're supposed to do is kind of clear your mind of all that and look at everything with a blank slate, evaluate all the threats and all the opportunities related to the mission, use everybody's brain cells, throw it up all on the wall, see what sticks, rehearse and practice and experiment to see if it's feasible. And then when you, usually because of time, you finally have to come up with a way to do things, you lock the plan down, and then you go out and execute. And when you execute, like I mentioned before, you get in there and the weather's wrong. The waves are a lot higher than you thought they were going to be. The friendly guide that was supposed to meet you on the beach isn't there. They told you there was going to be 2 bad guys and said there's 40 bad guys and they've got dog patrols. On and on and on and on. Everything, the aircraft that drops you ends up dumping you in the mountains and instead of the valley. So now you've got 9 hours in the dark to try to climb up and down mountains to get back down to the valley. So you're way behind schedule. Plus you have a whole bunch of risk. That's what really happens because special operators are used for unconventional scenarios and they have to come up with unconventional solutions because they're unconventional scenarios. If there were conventional scenarios, they'd use conventional forces. So if you look at the business side of it, all those lessons learned derived from that, in my case, 20 years, you go into business, you say, okay, so I have to do the same thing. I can't rest on my laurels. I also can't sit and mope and cry about the mistakes I've made because whatever I did, when I did, it was in the context of that moment based on the information I had. So now I'm smarter, maybe a little wiser, maybe I have a little scar tissue. So as I move forward, I have to start evaluating the universe, the marketplace, customers, even my employees, based on reality in front of me, not what used to be the truth. And that goes the same with the education that you gain going to business school, what you learned in the last job. And that's what I mean, that sometimes experience is actually the reason why people fail bigger because they think experience is something that builds up to the point where you can't make a mistake. And everybody's supposed to be listening to you because you had the most experience. What you have is you're basically a historical success, but that doesn't mean you're going to be successful tomorrow.
That's amazing, and that's true. Even in like sports, a coach may have a particular style of play calling and how they do it, but they come up against a team that is doing something that they didn't expect, and then if you're not nimble, if you can't react and respond appropriately, then you get beat. Uh, I don't know if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, but that just happened last weekend to them because of, and that, but that's interesting because that happens. So when you are now, first of all, you spent 20 years in the SEALs, is that right?
Correct.
Congratulations, by the way. I imagine that. Did you get an extra pension for for doing that?
Well, I've got 80% disability, if that counts as an extra pension.
Oh, geez. Well, I'm so sorry that
Most guys in the team, back to the football comparison, when you're 17 and you pass all the physical tests at the beginning of the BUDS course, you are in pretty good shape. I was an athlete in high school, and by the end of 6 months, you are, you're not an Olympic caliber athlete, but you're definitely NCAA level caliber athlete, running, swimming, any kind of physical fitness. And that's about the peak. At that point, you get stronger. You might get a little faster because you lift weights and things as you're going along, but you start getting dropped out of airplanes, sliding down ropes and slamming into hard objects, and lots of other things. I've got frostbite on like 5 or 6 digits. My thumb got crushed. I mean, all kinds of stuff, and it accumulates. So think of that the NFL. You're a brand new rookie. You've made it through college without getting destroyed, and every year the game is chipping something off of you.
yeah.
It's taking a little piece of you. And that's why, just like with special operators, you get to about the 11th year and you're experienced, right? And you really highly skilled, and the Navy's probably poured about $2.5 to $3 million into you in training. So you're the $2 million man or the $3 million man, and you're half a step slower than you were last year. Now, you might ignore it or not be aware of it, except that the guys that are in their first, second, and third year as SEALs are saying hi to you as they go past you in the run. So, or on rope climb contests, or how many push-ups you can do, or you name it. So you start to feel the wear and the tear, and you don't even have to have a catastrophic injury. You can it's just,
the wear and tear,
vertebrae getting all crushed up and losing discs and knee injuries, and next thing you know, you look just like anybody in the NFL in year 11 or 12. You're just kind of limping along. You still know how to play the game up here. You can still shoot. You can still do all those kinds of things. But now you look a little bit like the deputy sheriff. You're just kind of walking around going, "Run whatever you say, sheriff."
It's kind of like the spirit is willing,
yeah,
but the flesh can't take it anymore.
And everybody's very respectful. sort of.
That has to be when you are at the top of your game and you're fast and you can do everything, and then you get more experience, and then these young bucks will come along who haven't been thrown out of an airplane as much and all that kind of stuff. By the way, what was it like the first time that they took you up in an airplane and said, "All right, jump"?
So I had to go through Army jump school where you got 5 jumps, and you spent the first 2 weeks basically learning how to fall down at different heights. They have all these different mechanisms and training devices, to include I think it's like a 90-foot tower that hauls you up and then lets you go. And there's a parachute above you. And then you basically float to the ground under a parachute. That's before you get into a plane. So they're very good at, stepping you and training you into that. And I was 17 and a half maybe at the time. And when we got in the plane to finally jump, just a big long tube, and we had about 40 or 50 people in this jump aircraft, and we were going to do a side door exit. So you basically hook up on a cable, and your face is like right up against the guy in front of you. And when they tell you to stand up and hook up, and then you buddy checks to make sure everybody's hooked up, there's a little safety wire thing you put in there. So you're going through it because you've done it a million times. So they've been prepping you for this, right? What they didn't prep me for was that when the side door opened, that at least a third of the men that were standing there started crying because they were terrified.
Sure.
And I wasn't worried about it, but then I started hearing all these guys that were older than me, some of them were sobbing, shoulders are moving up and down. I'm like, oh crap. Do I not understand what's about? Am I missing something here? But about the time I was thinking that, it was the green light comes on and it's go. And so each guy takes a step, turns, and goes out the door, and you're sucked out of that plane because of the forward speed of the aircraft. You got bodies are just in front of you, and all of a sudden it's you, light, boom, you're gone. And then you're out there, and then you're underneath the canopy that opens up over your head. And you don't even think like, oh God, thank God, or anything like that. I was just still kind of trying to get my hands around the crying thing when I went out the door. And because they do lower altitude with that particular kind of training, you only have a few seconds before you hit the ground, and you can't really steer those old parachutes in those days. So you basically do a little bit of a steerage to turn into the wind, and about the time you go, count to 7, you're hitting the ground, and then you're supposed to practice that thing that they've been telling you to do and how to fall. And half the people forget because they're so wrapped up into the new experience that they just land like a bag of donuts. And that's jump 1. All right. So I walked away from that saying, okay, I didn't cry, so I guess I did okay. And so then you do the 5 jumps. They give you the Army Airborne wings, and then I go to SEAL Team 2, and we're doing jumps out of airplanes into the ocean. Similar situation, except that you're getting out of your parachute, and in combat, they let the parachute sink while you swam to a boat. The boat was also being parachuted out of the back of a cargo plane. And so you have a boat comes out, cargo chute opens up, the boat's going down. The rest of you run out the back of the cargo plane out of the tail ramp. So all your canopies open and you're floating down. You get rid of the parachute, you swim over to the boat, you cut some lines, put the engine in the water, get a head count, and take off towards the enemy beach. So we were doing that all the time, probably 25 times a year easily. And that's just what's called static line. That's where you're actually attaching yourself to the plane. Then
go ahead.
Well, so the other kind of jumping is called free fall, or it's the same thing as skydiving. And in that case, you're just jumping out of the plane, and you either are falling from a really high altitude for a long time before you open your chute. That's called high altitude, low opening. Or you're jumping out, and within a few seconds, you're opening up your canopy, and that's called high altitude, high opening. So it's hey low and hey ho. And you, in the first one, you just fall, and you're cold, and you wait. You've got an altimeter. It's telling you what the altitude is. You pulled on the altitude. The whole team kind of finds itself on the ground. In hey ho, you jump out as a team. Every person jumps out with a little bit different count. They pull their chutes on those counts. You all open up, and then you get in a stack, and you fly in a formation across the ocean towards the enemy beach. And that takes a lot of time and effort. I had a little over 750 of those kinds of jumps.
Wow. And hence the reason why you have disability now is that,
well, yeah,
the odds of you doing it perfectly every time are pretty astronomical, I would think.
Yeah, it's a lot of things that can happen, but and the more experienced you get, the more practice you get, you go one of two ways. You either get a little bit more slack in checking everything because you're so experienced, or you get more attentive because you're so experienced, And if you see some guys having trouble, guys running into each other in the sky and breaking bones and stuff because you're moving at real high velocity. I never had a problem with any of my parachutes, and I probably had about 100 or so static line and 750 skydives. But I did mess up my back because coming down with a stack above me, getting ready to land, 7 or 8 guys above me, I hit a wind shear. It was out in California in the desert, and my parachute just looked like a hand, went like this, like it was a napkin, went, and they were videotaping us. And I got to see the videotape later, but you see this perfect stair step of big square canopies, beautiful, coming in. They're powder blue, and then all of a sudden you see the one in the front go, and you see me detach from the formation, and then you see my arms going like this, and then you see this Wile E. Coyote. But I only dropped it. The wind shear hit me at 60 feet, and it was probably the equivalent of dropping from about 40 feet. Because I was going faster and faster, and messed my back up. But I landed in the only sagebrush, within 100 yards. And I think that's what kept me from getting really, really hurt.
Well, again, I got it. And now, are you going to write a book about your experiences in the SEALs, or are you not allowed to?
I have more fun. Like, I have 5 novels that are, it's called the SEAL Strike series. I have a lot more fun writing about my experience in the context of a novel, fiction.
That makes sense.
For a couple of reasons. I mean, I can put all kinds of things in there. My books have some things I experienced in combat. I just put them in different places. I just put them geographically there. You'd have a really hard time unless you were a SEAL and knew something about a particular mission to know that I've taken a mission from here and moved it over to Africa or whatever. But they'd recognize the mission. So I have freedom to do that. I don't have to worry about telling secrets. I don't have to worry about diming anybody out or anything. So, also, you have everybody wants to tell you that the weapon that you brought up in the book was the wrong caliber for the year, or the wrong this or the wrong that. And which is why the other fiction books I write are science fiction, time travel books, because I don't have to worry about that, because in science fiction, you can make anything up.
Which can be a whole lot more fun. And by the way, before we continue, I want to do this because of your service, and I know that there are lots and lots of guys that have come back and have needed assistance when they come back, mental assistance. There's a lot of suicide going on. I just want to put this number out there. If you feel like, if you've come back, regardless of where you were, if you were deployed someplace and you come back, there's a number you can call 988 and then just hit 1, and that will send you to somebody who understands what you're going through and can get you the assistance that you need. So don't delay if you feel the need to do that. I know that, Marty, I'm sure that you've had friends and other people that you've served with that have gone through that transition coming home, and it was less than perfect.
Yeah. It happens a lot, and happens for different reasons. I think, and we were just talking about this. I'm in a book club with a bunch of SEALs, and I'd say probably there's like 30 people in the book club. Usually about 20 people show up, and about 2/3 of them are all combat veterans. And we just finished a book about Vietnam, written by a Vietnam officer who had lost. He went out on 6 patrols as a Marine officer in 1968 and lost one person dead on every patrol. As soon as he got into Vietnam, and he's the author. So we had the author, we had some pull. We had the author on the book club talking about the book, which was great. He's a Naval Academy guy. And we got into this discussion about the difference between PTSD with different units. SEALs in Vietnam were hunters. They were the demons. They were the ones that were scaring the hell out of the VC and the North Vietnamese. They had millions of dollars on their heads. They were called the men with green faces. They had all kinds of nicknames because they went out at night and they hunted the bad guys. And that tends to be the way special ops work. They're the ones that are out there hunting everybody else. It puts you in a different psychological position, as opposed to, like in Vietnam, you're a draftee and you go over and your best friend gets killed. There's a lot of different ways that PTSD can be generated. In the SEAL teams, and I'd say in most special operations units, one of the biggest things is that you're no longer there in the fight with your brothers.
Yeah.
If you're hurt and you're not in uniform anymore, you feel like a quitter or a slacker, like you rang the bell. And a lot of these guys hate themselves for it because they want to be back in there, toe to toe with the bad guys, shoulder to shoulder with, the men that they were trained with. So it's they call it the brotherhood. The SEALs, they call it the brotherhood. So it's a different thing, but it's super powerful because it attacks your self-esteem, your self-worth, your sense of purpose. Yeah. So it's, being a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret or anything, it's not inoculating anybody from this. And unfortunately, it happens way too frequently.
Well, and coming back into what we would, I don't know if we can term it that, but a civil society, that we would assume that they're not used to. They're used to the regimentation. They're used to the brotherhood. They're used to being able to do these things, and now they can't do any of it, and it makes a difference. So I implore you, if you are somebody that feels like you are all alone, because a lot of them feel that way, I'm told. I am fortunately or unfortunately, I never served. But if you have the need, 988 and dial 1, and that'll get you to somebody who can help you and can get you the assistance that you need, so that, because your life is valuable, you've got lots to contribute in the world, and we need you here, and we need people like you. So stay and get the help you need, and have a wonderful life. Enough of that. But I did want to mention that you've been on many television shows and hundreds of radio shows and podcasts. And is that because you are working hard to get the word out about your novels, or you just like the medium, or
Kind of two phases. I got out, and about 6 years later, 9/11 happened.
oh
And
yeah,
because of my disability, I couldn't go back in. And I decided, well, maybe I could do something. So one of the things I was able to get involved in, I actually left the profession I was in, which was I was a portfolio manager for United Bank of Switzerland. I was in my 8th year, and I sold my book of business to another advisor and struck out as a counterterrorism expert. And I worked for the United States government in lots of different places. I worked for the Greek government for the Athens Olympics, and same kind of thing, threat profiles. What are the bad guys thinking? What are they going to do? What's their most likely way of planning what they're going to do? Where would they be in their planning cycle right now? And what you can do, like storyboarding, you can back plan. You can say, okay, if the Olympics is on this date, you start back planning what the bad guys would have to be doing to be prepared to be effective on that date. And you basically create a profile of the bad guys, and you give intelligence services and law enforcement professionals a lot of insight in where to look now, even if it's 12, 18 months out. That ended up getting me first on Fox and Friends, and then I was probably on Fox about 300 times. And I was on Inside Edition and 2 History Channel specials, and it was all related to counterterrorism. And it was an appropriate topic because it was after 9/11 and all that.
Right.
And then I ended up doing some direct work for the government where I had to get security clearance, and I had to stop all my media contact. So I had kind of a cold zone there for about 7 years. So when I wrote the book and had to start marketing the first book, which was the first time travel book, I was kind of doing a cold start, and podcasts were out there, radio interviews were out there, and I couldn't go back to the same people that knew me from before, even though I had all their contact information, and say, hey, I want to talk about a science fiction book, because you're basically classified, right? I mean, if you're an expert in agriculture, they want you to come and talk about counterterrorism,
right,
and vice versa.
Exactly.
So if I said, all right, but if you want to talk about counterterrorism, we'll have you on. No, I don't want to do that. So so most of the radio interviews and the podcast interviews over the last 36 to 40 months, based on the books, based on trying to, all authors have to do this today.
Oh yeah.
Publishers aren't putting a massive amount of money into they do a little bit up front, and then you're on your own. So all the proceeds from my 9 novels all go to the SEAL Veterans Foundation. There's a program in there that helps veterans access PTSD services and traumatic brain injury experts. And then my business books are business. I mean, I take those proceeds, but I started going down that path. And what happened was being on and pitching the books, because the first books, I decided to do that. I didn't know I was going to write 8 more. My wife,
and you're not done yet either.
My wife actually said, "Did you realize you were going to write, 9 books when you said you were going to give all the proceeds to the?" And I'm here in Virginia Beach, and we're real close to the SEAL Veterans Foundation's over where I served for 16 out of 20 years. So I just walk over there with a check and shoot the breeze with some of my old friends every so often and hear about what they're doing. And so it's good. And like I told you, I like to write novels. It's fun. It's cathartic. I'm not doing it to try to make money. But the business books, my 3rd one's coming out this year. I just got the authored copies about 4 days ago. It's called Be Different. The business books were all about me trying to get out and do consulting and paid speaking on what we were talking about earlier, being agile, nimble, creative, innovative,
Right.
certain kinds of dynamics related to crisis leadership, things that I've learned in the SEAL teams, but also that I've learned as a CEO. And the second book's Be Visionary. It's about strategy and taking a vision, converting it to a workable strategy. And the 3rd book, Be Different, is all about pure creativity and innovation. So, those are fun too, but for all the reasons I told you before, it's kind of, I mean, this must be what actors are like. They never see what the final film looks like. They never hear the score laid over any of it until they go in and see the final, and then they're like, either, wow, that's incredible, or they're like, oh my God, you don't know. You put it out there. And everybody I help, all my friends that are entrepreneurs and stuff that want to write a book, that's the number one thing they say. Nobody is going to think there's any value in me writing something. Who cares what I have to say? It's an ego thing, but I mean, writing a book is a discipline. It's a lot of work, and marketing and promoting it's a lot of work. But that's what's it's not writer's block. from a standpoint if you can't come up with an idea. It's more this. It's almost like fear of public speaking.
Yeah.
It's something that visceral. It's like I don't want to get up behind a podium and tell somebody what my idea is because I don't think they'll think it's worth anything.
That's the negative aspect of what a lot of people do is that, oh, who am I don't know. I mean, I know some stuff, but nobody's going to want to listen to my stuff, that kind of thing. But in your case, with the chops that you have in so many different areas of your life that you've done so well, but I got to ask you, because I've been dying to ask you this. Okay, time travel, how does it work? Can we go forward and backwards? Can we just go forward? And if you go backwards, can you change history by changing one little itty bitty thing?
Yes, the time travel conundrum.
Yes, it is.
If you're a Star Trek fan, that was always a problem. Remember I said that writing a novel was better than writing a business book because you kind of make stuff up.
Exactly.
And I thought that writing science fiction would even be better than writing about seals because you didn't have to worry about having perfection on every little nomenclature and every little speck on every little. Well, I lied. Because it turns out you have to put a little bit of thought into what would be a feasible time travel method that passed the smell test. And I love watching. I was a real big sci-fi kid, and I love watching any movie about time travel. So I thought I was pretty much exposed to all the different conversations about how you could do it and what the problems would be. Remember the old TV show, The Time Tunnel? I mean, if you're old enough to.
I was just going to reference that because I didn't think you were old enough to reference that.
Yeah, so I love that, but the problem is what you just mentioned. No matter what the methodology is, there's always you can't change anything that's preordained, or anything you do changes the world, forever. I actually did research and I found a scientist in Oxford, England in the 1930s who came up with the theory of time travel. And then in the 1950s, another Oxford professor took it a step further, and it's an actual legitimate theory of time travel. And it was perfect for what I wanted to do. So essentially, time is kind of like frames in a movie or pages in a book. So if you want to go back, like if you have, the old type, 16 millimeter film, if you want to go back 20 frames, you didn't change the rest of the movie. Going back there, looking at that frame didn't change anything about that frame because it's done. It's already done. The universe is imprinted. The matter has been modified. The time-space element has been imprinted. It's a done deal. So what they thought was that if you could figure out a way to push human energy, they were using the soul, back through these layers, these pages of time, and you had a way of dialing it in so you could get to an accurate point, you could have this person be there and they could operate and everything, but they wouldn't have any effect because what's going to happen has already happened, forward and back. And they didn't talk about the mortality issue of it, but I thought, okay, well, all right. So let's say you can do that. How would you do that? So if you could do essentially like 3D printing and take your DNA and your mind as a download, and you could press that back through these pages, and you could show up someplace, it would be you, but you'd be mortal. So if something happened to you, you're going to die. All right. Now, how do they get back? Well, is there a time limit? Like, the time tunnel, they always get sucked because they're always trying to save them from whatever they're going to get into and just move into another, all of a sudden they're going to get eaten by a dinosaur instead of being at the Battle of, New Orleans or something.
Exactly.
So I looked at it, I said, all right, so let's say that they could be pulled back, but they have some kind of a device that if they hit it, and they have to have some free space around them so that the withdrawal doesn't get confused with other kinds of DNA and other molecules and everything. So there's got to be a certain amount of space around them when they hit this device, and then they get pulled back. So once I had that theory, what I wanted to write about was warriors and the warrior mindset and the SEAL ethos in a different way. So the time travel books are called the Time Warrior Sagas, and it's about way in the future. And the government has actually opened up time travel, something that they'd held in secret, because the number one cause of death in 2143 is suicide, because there's no sense of purpose, because everything's given to everybody. It's basically a cradle to grave society where everything's handed to you, and the human mind needs some kind of tension or some kind of something to push against. Medically, the lifespan is all the way up to like 160 years old, but nobody makes it that far because they get depressed and they punch out. So the government, seeing this, decided to open this up for time tourism, where they could go back. People could go back and they could go and see things that were raw and they weren't controlled and all that. And some corporations decided to take it a step further and created the Time Warrior guilds. So you had the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, and they trained people almost like gladiator type training. People paid for it, and they had to pick a time where they were going to go back to ancient Britain, ancient Gaul, ancient Germania, Rome, wherever they were going to go. And it was only before gunpowder. So it was basically your ability with a weapon, close range combat, your tactical skill, your physical capabilities. And I got my black belt in Muay Thai when I was 54, and when I started writing this thing. So I put all that stuff into it. Of course, it's the future. So there's all these hyper efficient ways to get extremely in extreme condition. So they have fitness and conditioning in these guild centers. They have the warrior weapons training. They have tactics, and they have this upload. They have a port in the back of their head, right behind their ear, where they can upload languages, histories, geography. They can't upload skills, but they can upload information. So then you have to go back in at least two people, a two-person pair, and then it's called either being pressed as one term. I had a couple of terms, but they get pushed back into the past, and then they run around and have a good time or die. And they
Now,
have the ability to exit, because they can hit that little device.
oh, so if they're about to die and they hit the device, they can exit and then go back without actually perishing in that place.
They could, of course, that would really be bad if they left their buddy behind. But
It's like,
but
screw you, I'm out of here. See
but
ya.
the first book starts. The very first book of the four starts with these guys in a Viking shield wall, and they're in a small valley in Britain, and they're fighting, and they're on the losing side, and the battle starts to fall apart, and then everybody breaks it, starts running for it, and these two guys are hiding, and you don't know that they're from the future yet when you're reading the book, and they think they've kind of hidden long enough that they won't be found, and they start walking towards this hill, and then somebody sees them. So now there's this big fight at the base of the hill, and they basically realize, and they're both wounded. They basically realize they need to get up to the top of the hill where it's clear, so they can punch out and get back to the their own time. But you don't know that until they get up there, and they're still killing guys up at the top. And then so, you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. And then there's this huge bright explosion of light, and then all these warriors are looking around and wondering what the hell happened. And then these guys are now laying on this platform in the year 2143.
And that ends up in a book that is put together by those folks saying that there was some angels or something at the top of that hill that who knows. But by the way, we've been talking with Marty Strong. Go to his website, martystrongbenimble.com. And I think your books belong in a series. I think Netflix should make a series about
Me too.
that.
I think so too.
So, or Disney or something, I don't know who, but I would watch it. That sounds really intriguing to me.
Yeah, and the society, there are all these great city states after the second Civil War. So the whole Northeast is like they call it the Great City. It's what New York, but it covers Connecticut and everything. And then there's L.A., Dallas, and Miami, and everything else in between is kind of like empty land. And eventually, freedom wants to get out, and as the books progress, the society is shown to be more manipulative, and all the small number of people at the top are controlling everything, and so there's a revolution. And so they're called a time for. So it's a time for glory, a time for truth, a time for honor, and the last one's called a time for rebellion. And guess who the only people that know how to fight when the rebellion starts?
The
All
people.
all the guild warriors, all those guys are the only people in modern society that have been trained how to fight, and they're on the good side in the revolution. So yeah,
So there you are.
there you
There
are.
you are. This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking with you. I know you've done hundreds of interviews. You've been on Fox 300 times. And if it wasn't that bad, will you come back?
Sure, absolutely.
I can't imagine. Were you, when you were on Fox, were you the expert, the counterterrorism expert that they would talk to, or were you one of either the conservative or the liberal guys?
No, it was never about politics. I was one of the either special operations or counterterrorism. Always in the Brady Bunch box set, or just two. But yeah, and I'd go to the New York studios and DC studios a lot, and sit there and yeah. I mean, it depends on the format. It depends on who's asking the questions. A lot of it had to do with the news. They limo me in there to go talk about Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, and then all of a sudden I'd get there, and while I was in the limo getting there was a bomb that went off in Turkey, and then they all of a sudden, can you talk about, this just happened. They'd hand me a bunch of paper, and I'm supposed to read it, and I've been preparing for one, and now so I know everything about Abu Sayyaf, and now I don't know anything about the Turkish,
Well, all I got to say is I'm sorry. In this world, there is so much work for an anti-terrorism expert.
Yeah, me too.
But hopefully, maybe we'll get through that one day.
Yeah.
So, anything, Marty, that you'd like to add before we go?
I don't think so. I appreciate your call out for the suicide prevention, and that's a great service, a great public message, and I'm sure you probably help some people just by putting that number out.
I hope so. I ran into it not too long ago, and I'm just so glad that it's there for people. That number again, if you missed it, is 988. If you're a veteran, punch 1 after that, and they'll get you the help that you need. And thank you for your service. Thank you for donating the funds from your books to the military and to help other guys get through it, because everybody that is still here is way too valuable, and we don't want to lose anybody.
I agree.
So Marty Strong has been our guest. Go to his website, which is Marty Strong, benimble.com. He's got business books. He's got fantasy books. He's got a lot going on. And again, he was in the military for 20 years, and I thank him for his service, as I know everybody in our audience does. So, Marty, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
And if you wait right there, I'll be right back. Hey, thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of PositiveTalkRadio.net. Please visit our website, oddly named PositiveTalkRadio.net, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we got.